This happened last year during spring break. I was excited, maybe a little anxious because my semester was stressful. My friends and I rented an old beach house in a small coastal town. It looked cozy from the outside, but the creaky floors and peeling paint gave it a strange feel. I thought it would be a fun escape where we could relax. On our first night we sat on the porch, laughing and drinking. The ocean roared loudly, but that didn't bother us. I just wanted to have fun. Then I heard it. Was that laughter? Splashing? I looked at my friends, but they didn't seem to hear it. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked. They shrugged it off as the wind. So I did too. It was probably my imagination. The next day we played on the beach. I was busy throwing a frisbee when I noticed some strange symbols drawn in the sand. They looked like spirals. I pushed it aside, thinking kids must have done it. But I felt strange about the house and the town. The locals kept staring at us like we didn't belong. Everything changed on the third night. My friends started acting oddly. They seemed drawn to the ocean after dark, whispering and laughing like I wasn't there. I felt cold inside, like I was suddenly outside of something. I wanted to join them, but something stopped me. I stood at the edge of the porch, my heart racing as they walked toward the shore, their shadows flickering in the moonlight. I stepped outside and felt a chill in the air. The ocean looked wild, waves crashing against each other violently. "Hey, where are you guys going?" I called out. They turned back, but their faces seemed strange, distant. I felt a sudden divide opening between us. I chose to stay back, some part of me warning me not to follow. By the fifth day, things escalated. I kept seeing shadows darting through the trees next to our house. I convinced the others to go to the local pub, but all they wanted to talk about was the beach and the night. I decided to stay up that night, hoping to catch whatever had taken my friends. Maybe I could figure out what was happening. As I finally drifted off, I heard whispering again. It wasn't my friends. They were right there, fast asleep. I sat up, confused. The whispers grew louder, rising from the ocean. I felt dizzy, unsure if I should listen or wake them up. When I turned back, my friends were gone. Adrenaline rushed through me. I jumped out of bed and raced to the door, expecting to find them on the beach, but it was empty. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I stepped outside, feeling utterly alone. Then I saw it. Figures, barely there, just shapes moving in the water. Waiting. My breath caught. I think I heard my name called, but I'm not sure. The final mystery of that spring break is still haunting me. I stood frozen on the porch, staring at the chaos of the waves crashing in the moonlight. My friends were gone, and all I had were those distant shapes in the water. Panic bubbled up inside me, but I couldn't turn away. I needed to understand what was happening. I called out their names, my voice trembled in the chilly air. Sarah, Mark, Lila. Silence echoed back, thick as fog. The ocean continued to pull at the night, an unsettling rhythm that seemed to beckon me closer. But I felt an invisible wall, a warning that made my skin crawl. I stepped off the porch, each footfall heavy with dread. The cool sand clung to my toes as I approached the water's edge. The figures in the surf were just out of reach, their forms twisting and shimmering like mirages. There was something about them, something familiar. I squinted, straining to see past the shadows. Then I heard it again. My name. Only this time it wasn't just whispered. It rolled over the waves, a voice sweet yet sinister. "Come play with us." My heart raced as chills cascaded down my spine. I stumbled back, glancing over my shoulder, hopeful to see my friends standing there laughing and teasing. But there was nothing, just empty darkness behind me. I turned to look back at the ocean, and before I knew it, I was standing knee-deep in the water. The coldness seeped through me, washing away my hesitations. I couldn't pull myself back. The figures were close now, almost distinct. Their features shifted in and out of focus, but I could see that they had eyes. Dark, hollow eyes that seemed to draw me in. Then I caught a glimpse of something on the beach that made my stomach drop. It was one of the spirals, like the ones I saw in the sand days before. Only this one looked different. It seemed to pulse with a faint light, shimmering as if alive. As the waves crashed, it shimmered in sync with the rhythm of the ocean, and suddenly, it felt like it was whispering to me too. I felt a powerful pull towards it. It was as if the spiral was a magnet, and I was a small piece of metal drawn to it. But my fear clawed at me, grounding me to the spot. I turned back to the ocean, where the shapes were fading, their whispers turning into haunting laughter that echoed in my ear. "Help!" I yelled, hoping someone might hear me. But I was alone with whatever this was. I backed away from the water, my heart hammering in my chest. I needed to find my friends before I got dragged into this nightmare. As I sprinted back toward the house, I felt a rush of cold air swirl around me. The whispers grew louder, angry now. I turned, ready to confront whatever lurked in the depths, but that's when everything went dark. The night swallowed me whole. I stumbled, arms flailing, as I fought against the darkness closing in. A chilling realization struck me. I was now completely cut off from everything I knew. But then, I heard it again. A soft, familiar voice. "Where are you?" It was Lila. She was alive. And she was close. I scrambled in the dark, the weight of the previous moment still heavy in my mind. "Lila," I whispered, my voice cracking. I focused on the direction of her voice, willing it to guide me through this thick blackness. "Where are you?" I'm here," she called back, her tone trembling yet urgent. I followed the sound, my heart hammering. Each step felt like I was wading through a thick fog. The chilly air stung my skin, but I pushed forward. I had to find her. Suddenly I stumbled onto solid ground. I blinked, and the darkness began to recede, revealing a narrow path lined with trees that twisted towards the sky. The moonlight fell through the branches, casting eerie shadows that danced along the ground. I turned around, but the ocean was nowhere in sight. It was as if I had been transported somewhere else entirely. "Lila," I called again, feeling the panic crawl back into my throat. "Over here." Her voice was clearer now, rising above the silence. I rushed down the shadowy path, desperate to reach her. It felt familiar, like something straight out of a nightmare I couldn't shake. As I rounded a sharp bend, the trees opened up into a small clearing, and there she was, Lila, standing in front of an old, dilapidated shack. It looked out of place, like it didn't belong to this world. My relief turned to confusion. Why was she here? "Lila, what happened?" I asked breathlessly. "Where are the others?" "I don't know." Her eyes were wide with fear. She shook her head. "I lost them in the water. I was trying to find a way back, and then I ended up here." Before I could respond, something flickered behind her in the shack. A light. A dull, flickering glow emanated from within, pulsing like a heartbeat. I felt drawn toward it, a part of me almost wanting to investigate, but the other part screamed at me to run. "Let's not go near that. We need to get out of here," I urged, but Lila took a hesitant step closer to the door. "Wait, what if they're in there?" she pleaded, glancing back at me. I hesitated. There was a gnawing sense of unease settling in my stomach. "Who? The others?" "Yes, I saw shadows inside. I think they might have come here," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Threatened by the thought of what could be lurking inside, I again looked toward the ocean's darkness, wondering if Sarah and Mark were lost in the depths of that chaos. And then, as if sensing my thoughts, the shack creaked ominously. The glow flickered violently, casting erratic shapes against the walls. "Lila, we have to leave now." I grabbed her arm, feeling the pull of that strange energy from the shack pulse through the air. But instead of retreating, Lila stood still, eyes fixed on the door. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving just past the threshold of the open door. "Something is here," I whispered, adrenaline surging. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from within the shack, sending a wave of dread crashing over me. The glow intensified, illuminating gaunt faces and hollow eyes peering out from the darkness inside. I stepped back, pulling Lila with me, but she was rooted to the spot. "We can't leave them," she shouted, her voice filled with a mix of desperation and defiance. I felt the ground tremble beneath us, and time seemed to slow, each second stretching into infinity. Whatever was waiting in that shack was about to come out. Then I heard a familiar voice amidst the chaos. It was Mark, but he didn't sound like himself. "Come closer." I exchanged a terrified glance with Lila, both of us realizing we were standing on a precipice where we could either fall into the unknown or fight for our lives. Either way, I had to make a choice. I felt my heart race as Mark's voice echoed again, haunting and low. The shadows in the shack seemed to flicker, unsure whether to retreat or advance. "Don't listen to him," I urged Lila, my throat tightening. We had to move, but her feet were glued to the ground. "I can't just leave him," she cried, eyes wide and desperate. "Lila, he's not the same. We don't know what's in there," I shouted, gritting my teeth as panic spilled over. The growling grew louder, even more threatening. Mark's voice took on a mocking tone. "Just a little closer. We're waiting for you." A chill ran down my spine. I looked back at the shack, my instincts screaming at me to run. But I couldn't abandon Lila. She was my only anchor in this growing madness. I took a step forward, trying to peer into the shadowy depths. "Mark, are you okay?" "Just come inside," he replied, a smile creeping into his words, but it felt wrong. "We've been waiting for you." I felt sick. My mind raced, searching for a logical explanation. If that was truly Mark, he wouldn't sound like a monster. "It's not him, Lila. We need to go." She turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What if he's hurt? What if Sarah needs us?" The growl inside the shack crescendoed, shaking the air around us. "Help us!" Mark's voice shattered, split between pain and something darker. It felt like a snare, trapping me into a web of guilt. I took a breath, shaking. "Lila, we have to think. What if it's a trap?" Before I could say more, a figure lunged out from the shadows. I gasped, pulling Lila behind me as a gaunt silhouette emerged, its sunken eyes glinting with the flickering light. It looked like Mark, but hollowed and twisted, skin stretched tight over bone. "Join us," he hissed, his voice warped and low. Terror clawed at my throat. "Get back," I shouted as I pushed Lila away from the shack. The figure stepped closer, blocking our escape. I could see its hands, thin and claw-like, reaching towards us. "Lila, run!" I screamed. As adrenaline kicked in, I shoved her away, ready to confront whatever this thing was. I wouldn't let it take her. But Lila didn't budge. "No, I won't leave you." She was resolute. Then a second figure appeared behind Mark. This one was much smaller, with wild hair that glistened under the glow. My breath hitched. It was Sarah, but her face was twisted in a mask of fear, mouth open in a silent scream. The shack shook as the energy around us intensified. I was trapped between reality and a terrifying nightmare. "Sarah," I shouted, but she didn't respond, just stood there, frozen. I wrestled with my thoughts. Could I leave Lila to save Sarah if I didn't even know if it was really her? A sudden rush of clarity surged through me. "We have to go. Now." I grabbed Lila's hand, pulling her with all my strength. As we turned to flee, I heard Mark's voice again, softer this time. "You'll regret this." The shack trembled violently, and I felt a wave of darkness crash over me, swallowing the flickering light. I raced down the path, dragging Lila with me, hoping we could escape whatever had just emerged from that cursed place. But as we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare was just beginning. We hadn't escaped anything yet. The wind whipped around us as we bolted down the forest path, each step pounding into my chest like a drum. I could feel Lila's hand slip slightly in mine, but I didn't dare slow down. Behind us, the shack groaned, its dark presence fading, but its echo lingered in my mind. "Do you think they're following us?" Lila asked, her voice shaky and barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I replied, glancing back over my shoulder. The shadows of the trees danced eerily in the fading light, but I saw nothing. Just the remnants of that cursed place, drawing its breath deeper into the forest. We reached the edge of the clearing, my heart hammering as we pushed forward. But just as I thought we might be free, I stumbled over a root and fell. Lila yanked her arm free and stopped. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just..." I struggled to my feet, brushing dirt off my jeans. I couldn't help but feel the weight of dread seep back in. "Let's keep moving." And then I heard it, a soft shuffle from behind a cluster of trees not far from where we stood. My stomach dropped. "Lila, wait." "What?" she asked, the fear coloring her tone. "There's something over there," I said, pointing cautiously ahead. The dark trunks of the trees formed a barrier, but I could see a figure shifting within. It had to be a trick of the light, I told myself, but the sensation of being watched prickled my skin. Before I could stop it, curiosity pulled me forward. I took a few steps toward the sound, instinct stabbing me to stay put. "No, we should just go." "Mark?" A voice came from the shadows. It was Sarah's voice. "Sarah?" I called, my heart leaping into my throat. Hope and fear clashed inside me. "Is that really you?" And then she stepped out, but not alone. Two more figures followed. Mark, twisted but unmistakably him, and another shadow, a tall man with wild hair that seemed to flicker like a flame. "Help us, please," Sarah said, her eyes wide, pleading. "No!" Lila shouted, her voice sharper than before. "It's not them. We can't go back." "Run," I yelled. But as I turned to pull Lila, my feet were heavier than lead. The air felt thick, buzzing with an energy I couldn't understand. My vision flickered, a mix of fear and disbelief weighing me down. "Stay with us," Mark's voice echoed, but it lacked warmth. "We need you." "Don't listen." I turned, clenching my teeth, grabbing Lila's hand tight, but she stood frozen, trapped in a moment of confusion. I took a breath, trying to shake the fog from my mind. "We have to move. They're not real." Then, just as I tried to drag Lila back, the tall figure stepped closer, its features sharp and contorted, eyes glinting with something sinister. I could see its teeth, gleaming white, too many for a human mouth. It's been so long since we've had guests. That was when I felt it. A sharp pain shot through my wrist. I looked down and saw a small, dark hand gripping me, fingers curling like a vine. "Let go!" I shouted, panicking, trying to shake free. "Leave us alone!" But the grip tightened, and I could hear the soft, mocking laughter emerging from the shadows. "You have nowhere to go." A scream clawed its way out of Lila's throat. I turned to face her, desperate to break her from whatever hold this thing had on her. But in that moment, everything went dark. Then came a flash, a vision of the shack, swirling with shadows and those twisted faces. Something terrible was happening. I could feel it, and it scared me more than anything. As the darkness consumed us, I vowed to fight back, even if I didn't know how. Because if I didn't, I feared we'd never escape this nightmare. I gasped as the darkness surrounded me like a thick fog. My heart raced, a panic that filled every part of me. I tried to call out for Lila, but the words were lost in the void. Everything felt unreal, and fear twisted my stomach. A moment passed, long enough for me to wonder if we'd slipped into some other world. Then, abruptly, light pierced through. It was faint, but enough to create shapes in the thick shadows. I blinked against the glow, adrenaline sharpening my senses. "Mark?" Lila's voice trembled, breaking through my muddled thoughts. It pulled me back, grounding me in the moment. Lila, I called out, and the haziness lifted, revealing a dimly lit room. I quickly scanned the space. It was familiar, the corners smelling of damp wood and mold. We were in the shack, but it was different. The furniture lay in disarray, as if a tornado had swept through it. Yet, threads of shadow danced along the walls. "Over here!" Lila shouted from the other side of the room. I rushed toward her voice, dodging fallen chairs and shattered glass. When I found her, she stood trembling, her eyes darting around. "What happened?" I asked, confused. "Are we—" But before I could finish, the ground rumbled beneath us. I felt the vibrations echo through my bones. "We need to get out." The atmosphere changed, thick and hostile, pushing against the walls like it wanted to engulf us whole. Lila nodded, her fear mirroring mine. Then I saw something shift in the corner of my vision. I turned, and there it was again. The tall figure with wild hair. It loomed, its mouth stretching into a grin that sent shivers down my spine. "Where do you think you're going?" Panic ignited within me. "We're not staying here." I grabbed Lila's hand and we bolted toward the door. As we reached for it, the laughter echoed around us, disorienting and cruel. It followed us, swirling like smoke. The door creaked open and we burst into the cool night. But instead of the forest, we stood on a path littered with memories of our time in the shack. Each step brought distorted images of our past, birthdays, laughter, and shadows creeping into our happy moments. "What is happening?" Lila whispered, her voice shaky. "Why are we seeing this?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that we needed to keep moving. I pulled her forward, but each step was heavy, as if the ground itself refused to let us go. "We have to get away. Just keep running." The sound of footsteps echoed behind us. My fear spiked, and I fought the urge to turn around. "Just keep going," I told myself. I could feel the energy pressing against my back, hoping to pull us back into the darkness. And that's when we stumbled across a clearing, the moonlight breaking through the canopy above. In the center stood a massive tree, its bark twisted and gnarled, like it had a life of its own. Chills ran through me, and I felt the pull of the shadows once more. They were gathering at the edges of the clearing, writhing like a living thing. "Mark," Lila gasped. "What do we do?" I thought of the figures from before, how they'd tried to trick us. I looked back at the tree, its branches reaching toward us. "We have to confront it. Whatever this is, it's feeding off our fear." With a deep breath, I stepped closer to the tree, pulling Lila with me. The shadows writhed and hissed, but I stood firm. "We won't give in. We're not afraid of you." The winds shifted dramatically as the shadows darted closer, but I felt a surge of determination. Then, everything froze. That's when I saw it, a glinting object buried in the roots of the tree. It looked like a pendant glowing faintly. Whatever it was, it felt important. The shadows surged again, but I couldn't back down now. "Lila, stay close," I shouted, reaching for the pendant. I had to find out what it meant, even if it led us into deeper danger. We were in this together, and I was ready to face whatever came next. As my fingers brushed against the cool surface of the pendant, a surge of energy coursed through me. It felt like a jolt, awakening something long dormant. I gripped it tightly, half expecting the shadows to swoop down at any moment. The laughter faded, replaced by an eerie silence that enveloped the clearing. "What is it?" Lila whispered, her wide eyes fixed on the pendant. "I don't know, but it feels important." I held it up, letting the faint light illuminate our faces. Beneath the glow, the shadows flickered and hesitated, as if they were unsure of what to do next. The moment lingered, heavy with tension. Then I noticed that the shadows were slowly retreating. With each inch the pendant gained in brightness. It felt like we were pushing back against the darkness that had been chasing us. "Oh, Mark, I think it's working." Lila's voice surged with hope. But before I could respond, the shadows shifted violently, swirling like a tempest around the tree. I felt a cold wind whip through the clearing, raising the hairs on my arms. The laughter was replaced by a guttural growl. "You think that trinket can save you?" It was the figure from before, closer now, its outlines becoming clearer. Its grin deepened, baring jagged teeth under the moonlight. "Run!" I shouted, yanking Lila back as I prepared to flee. But we didn't get far. The branches of the tree twisted together, forming a barrier that loomed before us. We were trapped. "Mark!" Lila cried, panic behind her eyes. "What do we do?" I was caught between the fear of that dark figure advancing and the feeling that I had to harness the pendant somehow. An idea sparked, though it felt reckless. "I think we have to use it." I turned the pendant toward the tree, hoping it could do what it had just done a moment ago. "What if it doesn't work?" Lila said, glancing back at the figure, which was only moments away from reaching us. "Then we'll figure it out together," I said, determination burning my chest. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, focusing on the warmth the pendant had given me. "We can't be afraid." I plunged the pendant forward, channeling every ounce of courage into it. The light flared dramatically, and the shadows shrieked, recoiling. Suddenly, beams of light shot from the pendant, wrapping around the gnarled roots like serpents. The ground quaked. "No!" The figure howled, its voice an echo of rage that chilled me to the bone. "You don't understand what you're meddling with." As the light intensified, I felt a pull on my chest. The shadows, once a menacing force, began to disintegrate, dissolving into the night air. My heart raced. I could hardly believe it was working, but just as fast as I'd felt hope, doubt crept in. What if I had made it worse? Before I could think it through, a blinding flash enveloped us, knocking us to the ground. I felt Lila's hand slip from mine. Panic surged as I reached for her, but everything around us began to spin. Then darkness consumed us again. When the world finally stopped moving, I opened my eyes. I was alone in a vast, empty landscape, the pendant still clutched in my hand. I looked around desperately for Lila, but she was nowhere to be seen. "Lila!" I shouted, fear clawing at my throat. There was no response, just silence. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. What had I done? Suddenly a cold wind blew, and I felt the shadows shift again, lurking just beyond my vision. They were gathering, ready to strike. "Not again," I murmured, heart pounding. I had to survive this. I had to find Lila. The shadows loomed closer, whispers tinged with malice filling the air. And in that moment, I knew this was only the beginning. I took a shaky breath, clutching the pendant tightly. The last thing I wanted was to face whatever these shadows were, but I couldn't stay frozen in place. I had to find Lila. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. The shadows flickered, almost as if they were responding. One darted forward, swirling like smoke. I flinched but stood my ground. "Show yourself," I demanded, more bravely than I felt. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was a young girl, not much older than Lila. Her features were delicate, but her eyes were hollow, reflecting the emptiness around us. "You shouldn't have come here," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Where's Lila?" I asked, desperation lacing my words. "She is lost," the girl replied, looking at me with a mix of pity and fear. "Just like you." "Lost? What do you mean?" "We were together." I tried to gather my thoughts, but felt my chest tighten. "What have you done with her?" The girl backed away, her form flickering like a candle's flame. "This place isn't for the living. It feeds on your fears." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I pressed, wanting answers, needing to know what this place could do. But she only shook her head, her voice trembling as she spoke. You must leave before it takes you too. Before I could respond, shadows surged around us, growling like wild animals. "No!" I yelled, stepping back. The girl vanished in an instant, swallowed by the darkness. I was alone again, and the shadows were closing in fast. I turned and ran. The ground beneath me felt like it was shifting, pulling me deeper into the landscape. I stumbled, the pendant's glow flickering. "Stay lit!" I shouted at it. I couldn't let it go out, not now. As I fled, a jagged rock jutted out from the ground, and I tripped, landing hard. Pain shot through my ankle, but I forced myself to get back up. The shadows were relentless, urging me onward with their incessant whispers, echoing my fears back at me. "You'll never find her," they taunted. "You'll be lost too." I finally made it to a small hill and looked back. The shadows were swirling, forming a dark tempest behind me. "What are you?" I panted, feeling small and overwhelmed. "Something you can't escape," came a deep, rumbling voice from the center of the storm. "Join us, Mark. Embrace the darkness." "No," I shouted, heart racing. Then, from the haze, a flicker of light appeared. It was weak, but unmistakable, just like the pendant. That's when I realized the pendant wasn't just my lifeline. It was the key to fighting back. With a surge of determination, I raised the pendant high, drawing on every ounce of strength I had left. I could feel the warmth pulsating through me, pushing against the shadows that threatened to surround me completely. But before I could unleash its power, the ground shook violently. I had barely steadied myself when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Someone was here with me. I gasped and turned around, hope and dread colliding in my chest. "Mark, don't give in." It was Lila's voice, but where was she? I glanced around, searching for her in the chaos. Everything began to swirl again, and I feared I was losing her once more. "Hold on," I yelled, feeling the weight of our connection pull me closer to her. I had to find her before the shadows swallowed us both. I closed my eyes, focusing on Lila's voice, trying to block out the shadowy whispers that filled my ears. "I'm coming for you," I shouted, hoping she could hear me, hoping she wasn't too far away. The shadows twisted and curled around me, their fingers brushing my skin like icy tendrils. "Mark," Lila's voice echoed again, stronger this time. "Follow the light." With renewed energy, I pushed through the disorienting gloom, keeping the pendant raised. The glow from it was dimming but still shining, a beacon amid the chaos. "I'm trying," I yelled back, my voice cracking with fear and exertion. As I stumbled forward, the ground beneath me shifted, pulling me in conflicting directions. Then, just ahead, I spotted a faint, shimmering path appearing through the darkness. I didn't hesitate, sprinting toward it, driven by the possibility that it could lead me to her. The shadows writhed around me, angry and howling, trying to drag me back. "You won't find her," they roared, their voices merging into a cacophony of despair. I pushed through the overwhelming noise, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. Then, the path opened up into a small clearing and I halted, gasping. In the center I saw a glow brighter than the pendant. It was a small, ethereal orb of light, pulsating gently. My instincts screamed at me to investigate, but I hesitated, my mind racing with questions. "What are you?" I asked, inching closer. The light flickered, and within it, I caught glimpses of a figure. "Help me," a soft voice pleaded, echoing around me. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Lila," I whispered, hope surging again. I stepped forward, but the shadows roared back to life. They surged into the clearing, reaching for me, desperate to pull me away from the light. "Get back," I shouted, brandishing the pendant between me and the shadows. The orb pulsed brighter, pushing back against the darkness, but I was still vulnerable. I could feel the weight of despair wrapping around me, threatening to suffocate me. Suddenly a scream shattered the moment. It was high and piercing, echoing in the air like a siren. My heart dropped. "Lila," I screamed, spinning in the direction of the sound. The shadows shrieked back as if the scream had angered them. But there was no time for fear. I needed to find her. I bolted back toward where I heard her voice. It sliced through the night like a knife through fog. Traveling deeper into the unknown, I felt the pendant radiate warmth, urging me on with every stride. I knew I had to reach her before the shadows consumed us both. Then I encountered a wall of darkness so dense it nearly stopped me in my tracks. "Lila," I called again, desperation seeping into my voice. But instead of an answer, I heard the deep rumbling voice again. "You're not meant for this world, Mark. It's time to surrender." "Never," I declared, feeling anger bubble up within me. I pushed forward, determined to break through this barrier. Suddenly the shadows lunged at me from all sides, clawing and grasping. I swung the pendant, a desperate attempt to fend them off. In the chaos, I caught a glimmer of movement in the corner of my eye. Something was emerging from the shadows, and it felt wrong. I froze, realizing I wasn't alone anymore. Something else was here. I took a deep breath, rallying my resolve, but before I could react, the darkness enveloped me completely. And then, everything went dark. I blinked, the darkness fading slowly, replaced by a dim light filtering through branches overhead. Somewhere nearby, I could hear the soft rush of waves. My body ached as I pushed myself off the ground, disoriented. Where was I? "Lila?" I called, my voice catching on the salt in the air. My heart pounded in my chest as I took in my surroundings. I was back at the beach, but it was eerily quiet. I struggled to my feet, scanning the sand for any sign of her. But there was nothing, just me and the relentless sound of the ocean. As I staggered forward, I spotted something half buried in the sand. It was the pendant, flickering weakly before finally dimming completely. I picked it up, holding it tightly in my palm. I could feel the weight of what it represented. The shadows, Lila, the shack, it all rushed back. "Lila," I shouted again, desperation pouring out. My voice was swallowed by the wind. I stumbled along the shoreline where we had spent our last carefree hours, hoping against hope that she'd somehow surface from whatever had taken her. Then I heard it. A whisper on the wind, familiar and haunting. "Mark." "Lila!" I turned, adrenaline surging. "Where are you?" But the voice dissipated like mist, leaving only the sound of crashing waves. Panic gripped at me as I looked back toward the dark ocean, every instinct telling me to run. I felt the pull of something deep within those murky waters, the very thing that had drawn my friends in before. I turned towards the beach house, its weathered silhouette contrasting the bright morning sky. I thought of the spirals, the stares of the locals, the way the darkness had seeped into everything. A sick feeling churned in my stomach. I needed to find a way to save Lila. With each step towards the house, it felt as if I was wading through the remnants of my own dread. I could still hear those whispers echoing faintly. "We're waiting," they taunted. As I reached the old porch, a thought nagged at me. What if the answers lay back inside? Maybe there was a way to find Lila, or at least to understand what had happened. I pushed through the creaky door, dreading what I might discover. The house was just as we left it, dark and musty, filled with shadows every time I turned a corner. I moved cautiously, every floorboard creaking beneath my feet as I made my way to the living room. There, on the table, lay an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. I picked it up, feeling the weight of history in my hands. Flipping through, I found sketches, spirals, dark figures, mentions of countless neighbors who had vanished without a trace. My heart raced. It all connected. The rituals, the darkness that seemed to pulse from this place. There were references to the tugging feeling one felt when close to the ocean, and an unmistakable myth that warned of the cost of joining those lost in the waves. But before I could process it all, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if Lila had become one of them? What if she was lost forever, trapped between this world and something much darker? I turned back to the ocean, conflicted as the waves rolled, invigorated by some unseen force. The urge to go back pulled at me again. A part of me knew I couldn't abandon her. I had to try, even if it meant facing whatever awaited in the depths. With the pendant still clutched tightly in my hand, I walked toward the surf, reluctant yet compelled. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the water in shades of deep blue. I felt it then, a flicker of hope mingled with dread. It was now or never. As I stepped into the cold surf, the water reached for me, swirling around my legs like a living entity. With each wave I called out her name. Lila! A plea against the chaos that surrounded me. The shadows below began to shift, coiling around my ankles, drawing me further in. I resisted for a moment, then dug into my determination. If Lila was out there, I wouldn't give up. The water surged as if answering my call. I felt the shadows rise, tentacles of darkness reaching out. I braced myself, raising the pendant high. I'm not afraid of you. The ocean seemed to roar back, but I held firm, straining to reach Lila, to bring her back. Yet visions of those hollow eyes and twisted faces flashed before me, taunting me to turn back. Then, just as the darkness threatened to pull me under, I felt a warmth surge through the pendant, an undeniable connection. In that moment, I heard Lila's voice again, clearer now. Mark, I'm here. I plunged deeper, the pull of the water increasing, the shadows hissing around me as I fought against the current. Hold on, I'm coming. My voice echoed in my ears, but before I could respond to her call, darkness enveloped me once more. And just like that, as all hope felt lost, I felt a sudden push, a burst of energy that launched me upward toward the light breaking on the surface. I broke through the waves, gasping for air, the sun's warmth spilling over me. But Lila, she was still out there. With grit and resolve, I turned back to the water, my heart pounding. The questions swirled, the answers just out of reach. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. I would not stop until I found her, even if the shadows tried to reclaim me once more. In that moment, I understood. I might never know what truly lurked beneath those waves, but I had to try. I had to fight for whatever remained, for Lila, and for the chance to face the darkness together, no matter what awaited us below.